Okay, good morning, everybody. Thanks so much for being here and participating in our webinar series. If you haven't been here before, this is our webinar series, Pathways to Prosperity. I'm Tiffany Brewster with New Hampshire Businesses for Social Responsibility. I'm the Director of Policy and Advocacy. You're here today to hear our childcare edition of What Makes New Hampshire Business Friendly. And of course, all of the work that we've been doing recently has been made possible by the Couch Family Foundation, Nellie Mae Education Foundation, and the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation. And also, especially thanks to our partners that have made the Pathways to Prosperity program possible with Needham Bank and Kennebunk Savings Bank. All right, so if you are not familiar with New Hampshire Businesses for Social Responsibility, we are a business membership association, and we are in a really unique position as a business membership association because we convene, as most associations do, but around the shared desire to do well and do good. We also support our businesses and members to move from ideas to action and inspire through shared storytelling and best practices, as well as lead with our values, because we know that we must all be the change that we want to see in the world. So this is an interesting place that has put us in for this kind of work because our businesses come and members come to us with the shared values of social responsibility and wanting to do good and be in good company doing that good. And so we'll talk more about that in a little bit, but give you a little bit of context for today, what we'll be up to. Today, I want you to leave with an expanded definition of business friendly and also hopefully some ways that you can act on that, and very specifically in the context of childcare. And so I'll talk about a little bit of how we got here, what the process was, why we're even working in this space, as well as give you some of the data that we heard from our roundtables that we had earlier this year. And then we'll dive into the meat of it, the narrative, what is business friendly, and then follow up with some actions that you can take. So, also want to say that here's some ways that you can engage in the entire presentation today. Come as a peer, not as a spectator. So jump in anytime. Feel free to come off of mute. We're having a conversation here. And when we're doing that, also feel free to use the chat at any time for questions, reactions. I have the chat open and try to keep an eye on it while we're talking here. And also, it's okay to disagree. We're going to have a discussion at the end of it that I hope that you're able to stick around for. And we've talked a lot about all of these different things and been able to have some folks bring up some really valid points, and it only helps us hone this definition. So please go ahead and feel free to disagree. Speak from your own experience and also leave with one thing that you can do. So, very first and foremost, a little bit of, oh no, I need to reset this. Hold on a moment. Here we go. A little bit of who is in the room. So this is a quick little poll that you can use the QR code on the screen to complete. And I'm going to put what is this called? The URL in the chat for people to get to .eu. And when you go to this website, you can use the password 4JX2 to be able to log into this poll for JX2. And I realized just now that it's going to ask you to make an account, and I apologize for that. Don't feel like you have to make another account. If you don't want to make an account, that's fine. Go ahead and put it in the chat. There used to be a way to do this anonymously, and they changed it on me. Buggers. But if you're in here, please feel free to go ahead and complete this poll. We're going to be looking at this all together. And again, feel free to use the chat. So if you're just coming in, you can continue as a guest. They changed it back. Thank you, Stacy. Wonderful. I appreciate that. We had some technical difficulties in the last one, so that's great. So we have some people from the business community, some nonprofit community. That's really exciting. I know that we have had other folks that we're expecting here too. A funder, ooh, very exciting candidate for elected official, for an elected official. Um, Very exciting community members.
Sorry, when I logged in, it
Yeah,
says GPs, the number of 10997 I claimed at work today, and none of those words mean anything to me. Is there like a secret decoder ring?
I don't know what that means.
Okay,
No.
I will just skip that and just say I'm in business.
Thank
Thanks.
you. All right. And as I said, feel free to go ahead and put it in the chat if you'd like to skip over using this. Fabulous. Wonderful. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for just one moment and then come right back to you here. To come back to you with another poll for you. So the next poll has to do with if you're a business or even obviously nonprofits are business as well. It has to do with what's impacting your business most when it comes to childcare. And so I'm going to go back into share my screen here and we're going to go into that same poll. So if you were there already, then you should have it there again. So keep the web page open so you can answer this poll. Which three impacts of childcare matter most to your ability to operate and make a profit? So as a business and nonprofits don't make a profit, obviously, but you still have childcare impacts. So you should be able to follow this same link to get in that was in the chat as a different password 1K8X to be able to go in there. We see a few folks have been able to already put in their votes. I think you can select up to 3. So we're looking here. What are the biggest? And again, feel free to put it in the chat if you prefer to go about it that way. Availability near work or home. And if I've missed anything, feel free to put it in the chat also. Are there other impacts to childcare on your business operations that are changing how you do business or your ability to operate, make a profit? Interesting. We have availability near work or home, eking out, edging out in the front here. Surprisingly, no votes for, oh, there it goes. Availability of slots is something that we've heard a lot about. Availability, then affordability. Yeah, it would be good to rank these, right, Stacy? Availability near work or home, affordability. And the difference between the two availabilities of is being able to secure a location at all versus being able to be near your work or home for your workers. I'll just give this another moment if folks wanted to participate. All right, moving on to the next slide. So let's talk about why now? What is it? Why is it that we're talking about childcare? If we do nothing, New Hampshire risks a lot here. So if you didn't know, business tax revenue is more than a third of our state budget. It's a really important point because if you know anything about New Hampshire's state budget, we don't have a lot of it. And so when it comes to businesses being able to be successful in New Hampshire, there are certain taxes that are based on how well businesses are doing and how many employees they have. All of those things are really important. So if we don't have the kind of childcare that workers need, then young families leave. But also, we have seen, and you'll see through some of the data that we've collected, that folks are leaving the workforce as well, not returning to the workforce. Skilled workers become harder to find. Again, we have data to support that as well. Yes, I'll be sharing these slides. Shayna, thanks for asking. And our competitive edge erodes and potentially businesses leave. And that's something that we've heard businesses already talking about expanding their business operations in other states when they are a multi-state organization. So again, really important to know and to think about in terms of our availability of state budget and what it means when businesses can thrive here. So, how did we get here? Let's talk a little bit about what we did first, and then I'll give you some more data and information. So we started with an iterative process where we had a lot of feedback at every single stage. So we had roundtables and a meeting with the governor's office that included employers. So we've gained 50 employer insights. And from those insights that we gained in that January, February timeframe, I synthesized all of the data, gave it back to the roundtable participants and said, what do you think? Did I capture everything? And so we had several rounds of the validation process. We also gave it back to our facilitators and our issue experts and our note takers, all the people that participated in the roundtables to make sure that we captured everything accurately and adequately. And then from there, we were able to come out with three roundtable reports, one of them specifically being on childcare, and got some feedback about that. And then we had our policy forum in March. And ahead of the policy forum during that validation process was this question of, okay, what's next? And what we got from business was being able to advocate and come around about one particular shared message or a shared voice is something that we saw a lot in the data, is that they want to be able to advocate and come together. And so I and my nonprofit heart thought we were coming to the policy forum to co-create this business-friendly narrative. And they said, you have all the data. Just tell us what the narrative is. And so, which was broke my little co-creator heart. But we did have all of the data that we needed. And we were able to write this business friendly narrative, but give it back to them at the policy forum, where then we printed it on these giant posters and gave them a Sharpie and said, mark it up, tell us what you think. And from there, we were able to really center the business voice to launch this shared message about what business friendly means in New Hampshire. And so we can dive into a little bit about what the data is and what employers are saying. So, as I mentioned, we put out this childcare report on the business perspectives on the childcare crisis. And the major themes or major takeaway or key takeaway points that we found through this report is that childcare constrains the workforce and business. So, their ability to expand and grow is really hinging on their workforce and their ability to even attract people here. Employer solutions are exhausted. They are trying everything that they possibly can internally. And realistically, I mean, the businesses that we talk to as much as they can externally as well, they're reaching out as much as they possibly can beyond their own bounds to partner, to work with other providers and see how it is that they can invest if that is even an option for them. But of course, there's a lot of small businesses that working outside their walls they don't have the capacity or it's taking away from their core mission. Um, and as I said, employer solutions are exhausted. Employers have invested and are ready for action. And we really saw that through all of our conversations. They're calling for a systemic public-private action along those lines. And there is broad consensus on public investment and an interconnection between childcare and housing that we heard loud and clear. So you can read that report as well as the other reports using the link at the bottom of the screen. Thank you, Zena, for putting in the chat as well as following that QR code. It's a lovely 20 some odd page read. So we also have summaries that are a little shorter if you're into that. So here is one of the quotes that I come back to often when I'm talking about these roundtables. And generally the kind of consensus that we heard is that businesses don't need, if you were around during the last legislative session, there was introduced a bill to decrease the business enterprise tax by 0.05%, which would have taken $26 million out of the budget and saved your average business less than I think it's like less than $50 a month on their tax bill. So if that tax money helps my employees, it's an investment in the community. And that's really a huge summation of many of the voices that we heard. But to get into those a little bit more, employer stories, we have stories on stories on stories. I think everybody here probably has some kind of employer story. So these are some that I pulled out and highlighted here. One of the larger centers in the Upper Valley recently changed their hours. We saw a lot of families enter crisis mode of what am I going to do? This can't work. So that was really exemplifying how it is that uh, the workforce behind the workforce, right? How important it is to have that reliable childcare in place and what it might do to parents when that might fall through. I had an office admin. We offered to pay 50% of the cost of childcare to retain her. She ultimately left. Even with that, it didn't make sense. And this, again, we're hearing time and time again. Employers are trying their best to offer benefits in ways that folks can work around their childcare situation. But at the end of the day, sometimes the math just isn't working for folks. I have an employee who has been on a waiting list for infant care for 2 years. She got pregnant after she was on that wait list. And that's what it takes sometimes, depending on the region that you're in, especially to be able to secure a childcare seat for especially infants, which is what we're seeing a lot of need for. How employers weigh the trade-offs. Would I pay an extra $100 a month so we could guarantee 50% paid childcare and then we could subsidize 25%? I would do that in a heartbeat, but it only works if everyone contributes. So this was a quote that again sort of talks about this idea that I'm either going to pay for it now or we're going to pay for it later. And so if there's a way that I can pay into a system that everybody else pays in based on the size of the business, and it's going to subsidize childcare for all of the employees, and that would really be make a huge impact to many businesses. Here we say they can't keep cutting taxes while making it harder to administer childcare supports. And people don't think about community impact trying to solve at-home problems. And speaking to this idea of when communities are not able to thrive in the way that they have the adequate supports to support a robust workforce, and we're not thinking of it as an at-home problem or an individual problem. It's really a community impact to having these supports. What happens if we do nothing? We heard businesses already tell us that they're having a hard time finding qualified candidates because the pool of applicants is smaller. Um, for entry-level workers, it's a losing proposition to enter the workforce. If their full check goes to childcare, they won't work, which is a direct loss of workforce. Again, we're hearing this loss of workforce, loss of workforce. If resources and investments are not made now to support childhood development, we will lose opportunities to grow, let alone meet the needs of the community. So really, really talking to this idea that this is a pretty big concern for businesses at this moment, and they're seeing down the road the possibility that it's going to be very difficult to do business in New Hampshire in the future. What would it look like if we acted together? So again, in this conversation, one of the key questions that we asked businesses during the roundtables was what they saw as the business role in solutions. And so some of these responses get to that idea of how should business that whether or not businesses should act together, which resoundingly we heard yes, and what that could look like. So here are some ideas that came out of that. Is there a way to create a partnership to come together and say we are willing to do this if the state will match this? Can these places hold influence to make the state do more? And so again, using that collective voice to pressure the state to say we need some broad investment here. Cooperative solutions, is there a convening organization to facilitate business working together to build long-term solutions? There must be ways to build solutions together without the business taking on liability. So again, business is really looking to take action here. And a reason for hope, there are a lot of really good things and really, really cool things that businesses are doing across the state. And this is only just two very small examples here that I pulled out, but I know that there's so much more going on. Large employers are intentionally investing in existing community-based childcare providers rather than attempting to build or operate childcare internally, because collaboration was viewed as more effective than siloed employer action. And then in the Upper Valley, we got a group of people together with all the different expertise in finance, HR, and facilities, and we were able to problem solve with them being childcare providers. So those are some of the voices that we heard here. And I'm actually going to stop sharing my screen and just offer if anybody wants to add to any of those data or comments or quotes that here we are. that we pulled out here. I know there's a few businesses in the room and also providers that maybe have worked with businesses. So I would love to hear uh, comments or additions to any of those. If you have stories, feel free to raise your hand or come off mute, put them in the chat. I'd love to invite folks to comment here. Not a single childcare story. I almost believe that. I can tell you.
All
Oh, go
right,
ahead,
I'll
Stacey.
help you out. I'll help you out because there's nothing worse than the crickets and being the facilitator. Like
I'll sit here all
it's
day.
just
It's
so
okay.
painful.
I appreciate you, Stacey.
So while I was reading that comment from the upper rally, and I was like, "Oh, that sounds really small." Oh, I think that was us. So what I wanted to share was when we were asked to help out a childcare center unpack some of the challenges that they had going on, we were like, what do we know about helping a childcare center? Like, give us a bucket of paint and a paintbrush, and we'll get volunteers to go in there and paint for you. But like, we don't know how to run a childcare center. And in talking with the folks that reached out, what we were learning is that they were looking for us to look at it as a business problem and how do we strategize business problems. And that we got that. Like we could do that. So we pulled together people from different acumens and brought them together, different business expertise. And it was really awesome to like all come together and help unpack and prioritize and really dig into things with a different lens. And they've told us it was helpful. And then they were able to then take that and then bring it back to the staff and board and work on it further and really start to prioritize what things they were going to do first. And then we also asked a lot of questions that they hadn't thought of. And so that was helpful. So for those that may think that you can't necessarily help with this issue, there might be more creative ways that you can help that you hadn't thought. So maybe that's helpful.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Stacey. I appreciate you sharing. Any other brave souls want to share?
I guess it'll be a Stacy thing. So I was actually very surprised over the last couple of months that I've heard from a lot of childcare centers that are saying they do have space. And in certain areas of New Hampshire, obviously, the southern part seems to be much more saturated. And so people do have space, but people are turning away and not joining because of the price. People can't afford it. They're not gaining, even with the scholarship and stuff like that, it's just way too expensive. It doesn't make sense. Like a couple of those quotes you put up there, it just doesn't make sense, even with 50% off or whatever it is, to still work for almost nothing. And I know a lot of us understand that, we're not, a lot of the childcares are not even charging what they need to charge to be able to pay their people. So I I feel like that's another thing that it's not just a slot issue. That is a huge part of what we're now seeing when the slots have opened up in some cases.
Wow, yeah, that's really really important and I can actually talk from my own personal story that coming back to work after having my first child, I actually had to negotiate an increase because the take-home pay and the amount that we were paying our nanny hourly because it was the only childcare that we could secure didn't add up or make sense for me to return to work. So there's another employer story. My poor employer was like, "Oh, I gotta figure out how to pay you more so that you can come back to work for us." So I think a lot of families are having to figure out that trade-off there. Any other brave souls want to chime in? Okay, for the sake of time, we'll go ahead and I won't torture you all so much, and we'll continue on the presentation here. So all of that, where does that leave us, right? All of that brings us to this idea of what is business friendly. And I hope that through all of the quotes that we pulled out about childcare specifically, that all of this doesn't come as a surprise. It's really just the summation and the evidence-based piece of what we were able to pull out as a definition of what makes New Hampshire business friendly. And so if you were able to attend our very first webinar, we do have an overall business friendly defined, but we also have these individual pieces of business friendly and individual narratives for each of these issues that we know are really important to employers. So business friendly, our tagline for this is when people thrive, businesses thrive. And so it's built on investment in people and places and having the policy and culture to support those investments. I see a raised hand. Donna, would you like to say something?
I'm wondering, there was, I don't know if it was Chronicle or one of those, they had it was something around Vermont, and I want to say it was Smuggler's Notch, and how they were able to offer free childcare, but then it became, in Vermont, it became a childcare contribution payroll tax, so
Yeah.
that it was now funded by business.
Mhm.
Does this ring a bell to anybody?
Yeah, it's Invest in Kids. Yes, Vermont took a policy approach. Tiffany, do you mind if I
Yeah,
answer?
go for it. Go for it.
Okay. So a lot of businesses, including some of ours, tried to take on this problem and open a center on site, and it proved to be too much. Figuring out how to make this a profitable business is very difficult, and Vermont placed an employment tax. So per employee, you pay payroll tax. And it goes towards increasing workforce salaries, I believe, in Vermont. Um, it's we could learn a lot of lessons from that, but we could also improve upon how they implemented because they did center-based workforce, and I think it could be expanded to include home-based or a mixed delivery system, which is a preferable way to provide childcare because people have different needs and you need to support a mixed delivery to have a robust system. But yes, Vermont took action. A lot of different places took action. Basically, it's supporting the robust business viability of centers by either providing extra pay for the workforce, which get paid very low, and there's a lot of turnover. So one of the problems of creating space is finding the workforce to open the rooms in the centers. And then providing the assistance, like Stacy pointed out, to childcare centers to manage their HR or other operations, the business side of things, facilities management, zoning, things like that, and increasing support so that it's affordable. Because you can't go up further with the cost, it'll be unaffordable. So that's not a good model for sustainability. I think that's as far as I know. I'll let Evan or other speakers come in to answer if they need to add.
Let's put an earmark in it a little bit just to make sure that we can get, because I think some of our presenters might answer some of that question as well, potentially. So we'll loop back, Donna, if you have more questions about it. Happy to answer them a little bit later. Thanks so much. Great. So this is business friendly overall defined here. And so we have people, places, culture, policy, and each of these specific issues falls within each of these areas of the overall business friendly narrative and definition. And so today we want to focus, of course, on childcare. So we have the narrative for childcare being that when childcare works, New Hampshire works. And this logo here, Business Friendly New Hampshire, is open source. There is no branding whatsoever on it that identifies it as being NHBSR's. And so we have invited people to download it off our website and co-brand it, use it in any of their messaging as well. And the definition really hinges on expanding the definition. We know that taxes and regulation are really important for business. And also, in order for their business to be able to be successful, they need childcare to be a competitive edge, an essential economic infrastructure. It really enables their workforce to be able to be at their desks or in the facilities at the production line, all of those pieces on the floors at the hospitals. And it really is so integral to their economic ability to continue to operate. And so for the business-friendly childcare defined, it rests on these four pillars of success. And so we have funding, which means that funding is steady and shared. And this is how we would know that we've achieved a business-friendly New Hampshire with childcare. So that funding is steady and shared. Stability, the childcare workforce is steady and uh, care is reliable. Thank you. Reading. And so our childcare workers earn a competitive, livable wages and have a clear path to grow. So they build careers and stay. Clear, sensible rules let our providers grow while keeping quality high with support to help them meet the bar. Availability care is meeting the needs. Families can access childcare that fits their schedules, budgets, locations, including rural communities, non-traditional hours, and backup care when needed. And then alignment. We need to solve this together. Like there is nothing, I put the gears here because everybody needs to be in alignment to make the gears move in the way that will solve this issue. Our employers, providers, municipalities, developers, and state leaders work towards the shared solutions that are needed, keeping childcare a top workforce and economic priority, with also making sure that we're using that lens that makes it important for families. We need quality care, right? We need it affordable. We need it in the places that people need it to be, near their home or near their work. And so if we don't have one of these pillars of success in place, then you reach a place where a business-friendly New Hampshire either isn't possible or becomes unstable, to give you that really specific visual graphic there to have that all falling apart. So to talk a little bit about that's where we want to be, right? With all of these things where we have sustainable funding and we have stability and availability, and we're all working together to solve this. So to dive into each of those pillars, I first want to set the ground of where is it that we're coming from. And so to talk to us about each of these different pillars and where we currently are, we've brought in some people that are really knowledgeable about each of these specific pillars in the Granite State and how they're operating right now. So our first speaker that we have here is Dow Drucker from the New Hampshire Fiscal Policy Institute that's going to talk to us about funding. So go ahead and take the floor, Dow.
Hi, Tiffany. Thanks so much and excited to be here. As Tiffany mentioned, my name's Dow Drucker, Senior Policy Analyst at NHFPI. NHFPI is a nonprofit, independent policy research organization based here in New Hampshire in Concord. We focus on topics, such as state budget, revenue policies, tax policy, the economy and economic security, and childcare, which falls under all of those buckets. So thanks, Tiffany. So I'd like to start with this slide here because I think it sets the stage for what the impact of a lack of adequate childcare in our state means for the greater economy, beyond just those folks who are directly impacted, providers, families, children, etc. I may be preaching to the choir here, but I'll speak to it nonetheless. So using New Hampshire or New England specific data, what we did is we summarized a variety of adverse economic impacts for households, businesses, state and local tax revenues when families are unable to access childcare services as a result of limited availability via slots that are available at providers. And we did this by conducting low and high potential economic impacts. Think of them as sort of margins of error using a series of indicators. And what we found was that for every unavailable childcare slot in the state, it could have cost the state upwards of approximately 264 million in total lost earnings to families, foregone revenues to businesses, loss in local and state tax revenues. I'd like to specifically draw attention to the potential loss of upwards of 59 million in statewide business revenues as a result of, parents reducing work hours, taking time off taking time off to care for children, etc. Next slide, please. So I think the next question is, what are the current state? What's the current state of childcare costs? So we've seen cost of care change pretty significantly in recent years. So from 2017 to 2025, the average price for childcare for an infant and 4-year-old in center-based and licensed center-based care increased by 32 and 33%, reaching upwards of $16,000 and $13,000 annually, respectively. These increases that were observed in most all age groups for center-based care did actually outpace inflation across the same period as time. Next slide, please, Tiffany. So then that brings us to, how are these costs impacting families in relation to their budget and their day-to-day expenses, living expenses? So I'll note that, per federal government guidance, childcare should cost families no more than 7% of their total income. I think you'd be hard pressed to find that these days. So for a married family of 4 making the median income with 2 children enrolled in center-based care, that costs upwards of 24% of their annual income. Looking at a single mother with 2 children, that would cost upwards of 58% of her annual income. So pretty significant costs accrued as a result of the high cost of care. Next slide, please. So I'd like to now transition to how the providers offering care services fit into this equation of costs. So one big point to make is supply constraints. I do see my friend Evan on the call, so I'll leave that supply discussion to them. But just to share a little bit about the cost of care. So there's no publicly available information on the detailed revenue and expense costs for providers offering care services across the state. But what we can look at is some national and some state level data points for inferences into those types of questions. So, as was discussed earlier, childcare providers operate on thin margins, labor-intensive care costs compounded by, expenses such as staffing, facility costs, insurance, supplies, et cetera, et cetera. We know that, providers are having a tough time making ends meet. Compensation alone costs upwards of roughly 70-80% of providers' costs. Something like, operating costs is roughly between 8 to 15%. However, many of these costs don't necessarily account for, what's often referred to as the true cost of care, which was alluded to earlier, which includes those sustained investments needed to help providers cover some of those more essential expenses, such as competitive wages and benefits, quality initiatives, professional development opportunities for staff, recruitment, retention efforts, which are all an important part of the equation. Next slide, please. So lastly, I'd like to discuss the funding landscape. So I know this graph seems a little overwhelming, and that's somewhat intentional because there really is no one funding stream for providing care services, nor is there any one type of child care provider offering care services. The ECE landscape, or the early childhood education landscape in New Hampshire, includes a variety of different funding streams, including philanthropic, charitable, family funded, publicly funded. We discussed a little bit about, tax credits. That's part of the equation too. And these funding streams lead to services provided by licensed providers, license exempt providers, and then also more generally, systems building initiatives at the state and agency level. And although we can't speak to many of these funding streams, given that they are private, particularly, things related to philanthropic and charitable, at least not publicly available information, we can say that the primary funding stream for providers is typically through kind of 2 buckets: private pay tuitions, those costs that I mentioned earlier that families are paying out of pocket, And then also the second piece of this, which is the publicly funded dollars. And that's a key part of the equation for provider revenue. So specifically, I'll draw attention to in the very top right of the screen, you see an acronym CCDF, and that is referring to the Child Care Development Fund. And the CCDF is one of the only dedicated early childhood education public funding streams in the New Hampshire childcare landscape. And much of this funding is dedicated to providing affordable care services through the New Hampshire Child Care Scholarship, which is a program that offers financial support for low and moderate income families to access care, and then also provide reimbursement rates to providers for offering those care services. Um, so of the total appropriated public dollars dedicated to early childhood education in New Hampshire, approximately 96% is derived from the Child Care Development Fund. There's some Head Start dollars, and then there's some federal relief dollars, but they're relatively minor. Of those 96%, just 20% are actual state dollars. The rest of the CCDF dollars are supplemented through federal funds as well as TANF funds that can be utilized up to 30% for CCDF initiatives. So, while the CCDF funding in Child Care Scholarship is critical for facilitating access to, care services, the state appropriations for the program actually declined by about 19% from 2020, 2021 till this most recent state fiscal year. So this reliance on federal funding has actually increased during the same period from 62%. So we've seen significant increase in demand. Meanwhile, we've seen significant increase in demand for these services as well. So there's a little bit of a demand funding constraint that we're seeing here. And next slide, Tiffany. So that was a lot of information. Thank you for your patience as I ran through it. You're welcome to reach out to us with any questions here. I'll just say, just as to sort of wrap things up, that sustained public investment is going to be essential for the New Hampshire childcare system. If we want to remain financially viable, fiscally viable, if we want to continue to support a stable workforce and continue providing these affordable care services to families.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Dow. And he's
Thanks, Tiffany.
Provided also some additional slides in here. So I'll just, those
if
will
you
go
want
out.
more complicated funding slides, you can look at those.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Those will go out with the slides at the end here. So thanks so much, Dow. Really appreciate it. All right, amazing. So to talk about stability, here, we have Stacy Neville from the Granite YMCA. So take the floor, Stacy.
Yes, thank you, Tiffany. So I'm Stacey Neville with the Granite YMCA. I am Vice President of Operations, so I oversee all of our child care programs. So we have 5 early learning centers and 24 after-school programs right now, as well as a workforce program for child care workers. And so just to, build on what Dow said, a lot of the stuff comes into the funding part of it. And childcare itself has tried not to raise the rates to the amount that it actually needs to be a viable business that people want to get into. And as he pointed out in a lot of those slides, it has still been an outrageous increase, even with being as moderate as they could possibly do. And the workforce is, the biggest part of all of this stuff. And it's not just an education issue. It does affect the economy from both ends of it. So currently, there's about 7,100 educators, and it gets less and less every year, and the gap gets bigger and bigger for people wanting to go into this field and staying in the field. There's a lot of people who will stay for a little while and then realize other careers are more viable, and so they'll leave, especially to go to the K-12 education or the public school system, which isn't a bad thing. We want educators everywhere. But we will not be able to staff the 0 to 5 because it's about a half the money you can make right now. 15 to 17 is that, introductory amount for childcare. It does go up with some of the higher tiers, which we'll see in a couple of slides from now, of some of the other areas that they are, but it still doesn't come close to what, a public school teacher can make in that time. So that is one of the biggest issues that we're facing, and the decline about at 8% in 2024 and continues to kind of remain around that part in the coming years. There's less people coming into the field and more people continuing to leave. Next slide. So just so to people to see, if you're not familiar with the different groups of where childcare, so a lot of people start at that childcare assistant position, and that is really that entry level. And so that's that, $14 to $16 an hour. And if you look at any other field that's out there, you can make more doing pretty much anything else, even, working at McDonald's and the grocery stores. So a lot of people are not starting off in the entry field like they used to and working their way up. So we're seeing less and less of those high school kids and those early college kids kind of getting into this. And they can work up to associate teacher, obviously lead teacher, and then director, and also beyond. We're trying to create ways for people to see that there are pathways beyond. You can start in a classroom and go to do other things after. I was in a classroom for years before, and now I do a whole bunch of all different things. And so there are pathways in, youth development as a whole and into this field. And so although every step you need to attain, more credentials, more usually college courses, more hours, everything like that, the increase that you're getting is not really proportional for a lot of the work that you're putting into it. So there are increases with each one, but again, it's usually a couple dollars here and there, which taps out typically at those lead teachers. Right now, the average in New Hampshire is between $20 and $25 an hour for them, and that could be people that have been in the field for 15 to 20 years. Next. And yeah, so just as a final, there are a lot of different pathways and a lot of programs in New Hampshire that are helping. Just similar, if I made a nice graphic like Dow made with the position of all the different funding things, there would be so many, but they're all very independently run by different organizations, different nonprofits, a couple state-run programs. And so there's nowhere that really brings all of it together for people. So a lot of the people that are doing some of these things have to go in and kind of either do it by themselves, or their employer or someone else needs to kind of help them with the process or help them create a path forward for them. So they're kind of left to piece it together without kind of one general system or funding or a group of people that are helping keep all of that together and helping people with that pathway. And I think that was all I had on all of that.
Thanks so much, Stacey. Really enlightening, actually, to go into the challenges that we're facing and going up against being able to create that stability in the workforce and in the childcare sector. So to move us on to just as positive things as maybe just as grim things, we'll say, to talk about availability and alignment. Alignment is very positive, actually. So we'll end on a high note there. But we have Evan England coming to us from the UNH Carsey School of Public Policy to talk about these two topics. So go ahead and take it away, Evan.
Thank you, Tiffany. Thanks for having me here. So yeah, I'm Evan England. I am research faculty and assistant director of the Center for Social Policy and Practice here at the UNH Carsey School. And yeah, I'll start with discussing childcare availability a little bit throughout the state. Next slide, please. So this is a map that shows you the distribution of licensed providers throughout New Hampshire. This slide and the next few slides has data from August from this month, so it's very current. So New Hampshire does have about 62,000 children under the age of 5, but we only have about 39,000 available slots in our early care and education system. And so you can see how they're distributed, with licensed center-based providers being the orange dots and home-based providers being the green. And so there is a lot of clustering around the cities. You can see in like the Lebanon area and Conway area, there's a little bit more clustering. And in lots of parts of the state, there aren't licensed providers. And Dow had a great visual that showed the different types of providers that families might need. Zaina mentioned a mixed delivery system and how it's really important for families to have choice. Not a center isn't always the right choice for every family for lots of different reasons. And so you can see how this distribution might not be working for a lot of people. Next slide, please. And so this shows you how things have broken down a little bit more by the size of providers. So since 2017, New Hampshire's lost about 5% of its licensed programs that serve children under 5. And that change isn't the same across different types. So we can see that the greatest net losses have actually been in the smallest programs. So programs that have less than 10 slots have lost almost 50%. We've lost almost 50% of those programs in almost the last 9 years. So those might be the home-based providers. They might be other types of providers that are providing care in more rural areas and more remote areas of the state where maybe there aren't centers. And so the closure of those programs is really impactful for a lot of families. We do see growth in the much larger centers. So if we're looking at centers that have 100 plus slots, there's almost 50% growth there in this amount of time. So that's a huge change. And it looks like maybe we have a lot of slots, and we do, but they're not really accessible to everyone in the same ways. Next slide, please. And this shows it to you in a little bit different way as well. So we looked at the geographic distribution with the map, and I mentioned a little bit about the geographic consolidation. So as home-based providers are closing, and center-based providers might be increasing, that does consolidate where there is availability in those more urban areas. Maybe it's in the Manchester area rather than up in the Coburg area. So we see, as I mentioned before, we have a 5% decline in the number of providers between 2017 and 26. License capacity has gone up by 22.5% due to those the center-based care increases. And we see that reflected in the numbers below as well. So while center-based provider capacity has increased, home-based provider capacity has really dramatically decreased. Next slide, please. And so capacity, as I mentioned, has increased for center-based care, but that doesn't mean necessarily that those slots are available to families. So overall enrollment actually only reaches about 84% of available slots in New Hampshire. And there could be a lot of different reasons for that. One of them we know is staffing limitations. So a lot of what you've already heard, you know that it's really challenging to work in this field. Not only is it demanding work, it doesn't pay very much, and for a lot of really good reasons. And so when providers were asked if any portion of their licensed capacity isn't available due to staffing, 15% of all providers in the state said yes. And we only had data for about 40% of providers. So 61% we don't know, but of the 280 programs that did respond to this, 15%, I'm sorry, well, about 33% said yes. Staffing is a problem that contributes to not being able to fill the slots that they're licensed to fill. Next slide, please. Okay, so now we'll move on to alignment. So we talked a little bit about the availability across the state, but now we can talk more about the initiatives, the partnerships that are happening throughout the state in the field specifically related to research. So my team at the Carsey School staffs the New Hampshire Early Care and Education Research Consortium. We are, as a consortium, we're a network of researchers and research users. So we're not just researchers, we are anyone who is interested in understanding and using data in the work that they do. And that could be literally anyone out in the world. Many of you, NHSBR is already a member. Many of you in the audience are members. Membership is really open to anyone who's interested in being a researcher or a research user. And so we're working to coordinate our collective ability to answer the pressing New Hampshire early care and education questions. The consortium isn't a project. It's a way of organizing statewide research capacity around real world questions. So we're really intending to do work that matters, that is meaningful to people working out in the field, to providers, to families, to other researchers, to the government, to business stakeholders, really to anyone who's related, who's connected to the field, which is all of us really, right? And the consortium, as I mentioned, is staffed by us here at UNH. And so what we're doing here is trying to curate and centralize research resources, filling research gaps with our own original work, connecting partners, and providing technical assistance. Next slide, please. And so here is an example of how we are bringing people together and the types of folks that are coming together to do this work. So we had our second annual convening in May of this year here on the Durham campus. The first photo that you see on the top left, we see a group of a lot of different people coming from a lot of different sectors, some of which that I mentioned, to discuss the things that we know as a field, the things that we need as a field. So during this activity, we were collectively taking stock of what we already have as a research field for New Hampshire early care and education. And then also, because we do have a lot of knowledge, we have a lot of evidence generated. You've heard a lot of great evidence from previous speakers today. And there's still a lot that we need. And so part of the day, attendees also plotted themselves on stakeholder maps. And so we have 4 stakeholder maps that the consortium has developed, and they're available on our website. There is a map that lists all of the researchers and evaluators in the state in this field, how they're connected, the type of work that they're doing. We have a separate map that lists all of the community organizations and network leaders, another map for research funders, and another for the New Hampshire state government and the different agencies and offices that contribute to early care and education. Next slide, please. And so what we've done most recently is developing a coordinated research agenda. So really the main purpose for getting together in the convening in May was to understand the research that we have and need, and to really start prioritizing that and aligning in a way so that we're not duplicating work and we're producing the work that is the most impactful. So we have understood the research agenda to center around 6 specific research domains, which includes things like family needs, preferences, and access. So family experiences are one piece of that. We know that we have to understand the quality, the type, and the distribution of supply. So that's part of what I talked about earlier. We talked about the workforce, which is another central domain for research, and others. So really, we know that these are interconnected. They're not distinct necessarily, but there are streams of work that might fall distinctly within one or more of these different domains. And so we've tried to describe them in a way that we can all collectively decide why they're important to study, because they all are in different ways. And in this research agenda, we're also documenting, sorting, and linking to different projects that are related. We're outlining some really pressing research questions. So really, where are the places that we should be investigating in the future for New Hampshire, and prioritizing those research needs. So as I mentioned, this is really a collaborative document. It's designed to help partners align work, to avoid duplication, and so that everyone can make better use of high quality evidence to guide policy, practice, and systems change. So this is a document that is publicly available. It's brand new, so I'm working on getting it uploaded to our website right now, but I do have a public link for it, as well as all the other resources that I mentioned and more. Next slide, please. That's it. So we do have a regular newsletter. This QR code brings you to the sign up page to sign up for that. Previous newsletters are available online as well. And I mentioned a lot of our other products that I can direct you to as well if you'd like to reach out. Thank you.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Evan. Thank you to all of our presenters for presenting on the current status of all of the different pillars of success that we reviewed over. And I do want to, I know that some people are having to leave at 1 o'clock to jump to a next meeting, but this is where we get into the action part. It's really important. So I hope that you can stay with us and come along for the ride here. I wanted to point something out to me that when I first started in this space, especially with our nonprofit partners, you'll hear the term ECE, or early care and education, and we made the very conscious decision to make this webinar focused on the term childcare because it's sort of colloquial, but the idea behind early care and education, the way that I really love the framing of it, is that there's early care, but also education is a really important part to highlight in that piece. It's not just this idea of sitting with kids and reading the books all day, but these people in the workforce are professionals, and they know all about how to interact with the children that they care for in a way that helps their brains develop into the best versions of themselves that they can be. And so I really love to emphasize that, and I really love that framing and using that term of early care and education. Broke my heart not to use it for these, but also wanted to make it very accessible for people that know it better as just plain old childcare. So appreciate again all of our presenters. So let's talk about action now. So we have, in partnership with all of our different narratives that we've developed, we have business action menus that go along with each one of them. And they all use the same words, essentially: unite, advocate, partner, invest, and participate. And so I'm going to pick through each of these and give you really specific actions that you can do in terms of childcare, specifically if you are a business or otherwise. This works for a lot of folks as well. Very first and foremost, use the narrative. I want you to download the resources. I want you to go to the website, or just go off into your world and talk about business friendly and what it means to you and your business, or to legislators, what it means for childcare. Is that we're supporting these other things, and we're weighing the options and weighing the value of childcare against taxes and regulation. And we realize that there's a balance. It's really important to understand that there's a balance there, and businesses are seeing that balance tipped in a way that makes it really difficult for them to maintain a workforce and be competitive across the nation. And so if nothing else you leave today, use the narrative, share it, talk about childcare publicly, download the business friendly messaging. It's all open source. Use the logo if you want to, or just use it in the way that you frame your conversations. There's also opportunities to advocate to help shape childcare policy. So we have, NHBSR has an advocacy committee. And so we would love to invite you to join. If Zena, if you wouldn't mind putting my email in the chat, you can email me if you're interested in joining our advocacy committee. You can speak on childcare in Concord. I can help you with that if that's something you're interested in, or meet directly with legislators. It doesn't have to be such a high threshold of like driving all the way to Concord and sitting in front of this committee of mostly old white men, sorry, that are talking about the future of our state. You can meet directly with these people, and you have really easy access to them because there are so many of them. And they really want to hear from businesses and help make it easier for businesses to be successful in the state, because economic prosperity means prosperity for the state as well. And of course, you can seek out trusted nonpartisan resources from New Hampshire Fiscal Policy Institute, University of New Hampshire, Carsey School of Public Policy. There are so many more in there that I didn't put in. Those are just a few smatterings, but most of our nonprofit partners, I'd love to connect you with it. They do really incredible work. You can partner to strengthen local providers. So we heard this amazing story from Stacy about how they supported local providers in technical assistance offering mentorship, training, consulting, and HR, all of the different pieces. I will say who was it? It was a business that I was talking to, and they opened a childcare business in their facility and had to close it because they couldn't make the numbers work. So it's really complicated to
That would be Badger and Gilsum.
Yeah. I wasn't going to call them out, but
yeah. No, they're public about the
that's
experience.
True.
Yeah.
I invited them to be here today, but they couldn't make the timing work, but to talk about their experience. So, but it's really important to know that like this is hard. This is really hard. And the best way that you can find out how hard it is by serving on a board as as a volunteer. There's lots of nonprofit childcare centers, and they are looking for qualified and really, really smart board members to help them make the numbers work and be really creative in how you do that. But I'll tell you, the business folks that I know that have joined those boards have been like, it's an impossible equation. I don't know how they even do it. And somehow they do. The other way that you can do is offer support directly. If you have landscaping or marketing or any of these services that you as a business offer, you can offer those in kind to reduce the cost to these other businesses. And that's a way that you can definitely support your local providers. And then connecting childcare owners to local business resources that you know about. You can invest as businesses. There are lots of tax credits, opportunities for tax credits, and more potentially coming. So there's the CDFA tax credit. There is the New Hampshire state tax credit that you can claim if you make up to 12 new childcare slots. There is the federal tax credit that is coming down the pike. But you could also just offer to donate money to fund equipment and materials. And sometimes these centers just need like a little tiny bit of money to be able to renovate a space. I say a tiny bit, more than they can afford, but it could be substantial, but small to your business, perhaps, to be able to renovate a space to offer more childcare space. So connecting through to your local providers, childcare providers, might give you that opportunity. And in the process, you might be able to take advantage of a tax credit, depending on how much that is. You can also participate by using tools that are available to you already. There's employee assistance programs and employee resource groups that you can promote internally to normalize the childcare conversations. You can, of course, offer internal benefits, flexible working schedule, compressed work weeks, paid time for parents. You can also consider subsidizing with stipends and dependent care flexible spending accounts. And then also there's this great assessment through the New Hampshire Best Place for Working Families that you can take to determine how family friendly your working environment is. And that I believe looks into the childcare space as well. And so what is next? What are we doing here? You're here for the childcare webinar that we had. We had one on public education. I can send you the recording. We have the recording up also on our website. We're also having one on housing, energy, and climate in the coming months, as far as additional pathways to prosperity programs that have to do with defining this idea of business friendly. Also, here's a really cool opportunity, and I meant to grab the link to put it in the chat, but you have the QR code here. On Tuesday, September 1st, in Concord at Delta Dental, there's an opportunity to attend a visioning session with only business members from 9 to 11 that is helping to vision what our prenatal to 5 system in New Hampshire should look like. And so that is a facilitated conversation that's supported by many of our partners. I will be there. And given the timing of it, if you want to have lunch after, let me know. I'd be happy to have lunch with you afterwards because it's lunchtime at 11. So, and I'll be there. So definitely reach out if you are going, and I'd love to connect with you directly. Some more asks and takeaways here. You can register for the business-friendly webinars using that link there, as well as using the QR code. And then, of course, all of these resources and information are on our website at nhbsr.org/bizfriendlynh. So you can use the narratives, tells you how to do all of that. And now is the time. I can't believe we still have 26 people here. I'm not going to send you into breakout rooms, guys. Everybody jumps off when I say breakout rooms. Don't jump off. We're not going to go to breakout rooms, but we can have some group discussion for those that are interested. And this is also your opportunity to ask questions. So I'd love to first open the floor for people that want to ask questions to our presenters. And then I have these wonderful group discussion questions that I would love to hear what you're thinking about, what you're wrestling with, what lands or surprises you. And also, if you want to commit to any actions, what is it that you're going to do? I'd love to hear all about that. So I will stop sharing my screen if I can find, here we are, and open the floor for questions first to our presenters before they have to run. They were that good. Nobody has any questions.
I had a question for Dow, actually. The funding model that you showed had a distribution to licensed centers and other. Do you know what percent goes in that slide that you provided from the public funding into just licensed, or is it equally distributed?
Hey, Zaina, thanks for that question. So it depends on, you mean just generally overall EC
Yeah.
funding? Because, okay, so I don't have those numbers because I think, given our limitations with some of the available private funding streams and the dollars that those make their way to providers, I don't have those numbers available. But we do know in terms of the publicly funded that the majority of the publicly funded dollars are going to licensed providers.
Mhm.
We do know that, some of the scholarship program dollars are eligible to be received by licensed exempt providers. My friend Evan at Carsey might have a better breakdown in terms of how many of those providers are receiving those scholarship dollars. Um, but we do know it's mostly licensed providers. However, there's also the question of there's school affiliated pre-K providers, right? I mean, those are license exempt providers, but they're receiving dollars from the school districts. But unfortunately, I don't have an exact breakdown, given the nuances of what's available
Yeah,
publicly.
thank you.
I had a question that I could have sworn I've seen this somewhere, so I'm not going to try and put anybody on the spot necessarily, but I'm putting you on the spot, potentially Evan or Dow. There's somebody that has done like the cost per pupil, or how much funding the state provides per child in childcare compared to other states. Anybody familiar with that data? Or maybe I made it up in my brain, but I think that is something that somebody has done at some point. Public funding per child in childcare, something like that.
So I'm if you're thinking of a specific report comparing state by state, I'm I'm sure it exists, but that's not something that I think we've produced at NHFPI. Um, we do know information around like what's the cost per child enrolled in the scholarship program. We know
Mm.
those numbers, um, but we don't necessarily have. I don't think we've conducted any publication on looking cross state, like cost per child. Evan, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would just add that we know that there are about 6,000 kids enrolled in the scholarship program. And so that's not all of them. And so the distribution of where that funding is going is limited when we're talking statewide.
Yeah, important context. Thanks, Evan.
Stacey, you're
Tiffany,
off.
I might be wrong, but I think Zach Sheehan with the funding project, I think he had some sort of data around that I heard months ago, just on the investment that New Hampshire makes versus other. I could be wrong on that, but that's where I'm thinking that I remembered. I definitely have heard a stat like that before because we underspend here in New Hampshire compared to especially the states around us.
I think it was something like a few cents per child in childcare in the state, compared to, of course, we have other states that have pretty robust systems there. Oops, somebody put a link in the chat. Did somebody find it?
I
Investing
have
in
one
early
that
years.
it's a report from the Brand Corporation, I guess,
Okay.
investing in the early years, the cost and benefits of investing in early childhood in New Hampshire.
Something like that. I will find it. Maybe I'll send it in the follow-up stuff because I swear somebody did this math. Go ahead, Bree.
I have a different question, so if we're not ready to move on, I can.
Yeah, go for it. You're good.
One of the key takeaways from earlier for me was learning about how less high school aged students are starting in these jobs and then perhaps staying. And I was just curious, beyond like other opportunities
Foster
that
care
might,
and that's to me all living.
beyond like things that might be more desirable for them, is there any connections between the increase in larger centers? Do they have, or do they tend to have rules about younger employees working for them? Like, I'm just curious if that's been studied at all.
I can't speak to if that's been studied or not. I know what we're hearing is that more people are not being brought into the field at an earlier level because a lot of those CTE high school programs have disappeared in the state over the last 5 to 6 years. So they're not getting the experiences with those internships and those hands-on things that was the natural progression for kids to start that and continue. Um, just from being one of the larger centers, we do hire a lot of high school people and believe in training our own. So my guess is that is what a lot of the larger centers are doing. But I think, yeah, it just the experience and getting people excited about it from an earlier age is just not there right now.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would just add that. So in our research agenda, there's a section for workforce, and one of our pressing research questions that we've added there is about like what are the supports, what are the conditions, the professional development opportunities that will help educators and future educators thrive and want to stay in the field, and that's a gap. So for New Hampshire, we don't know. We don't currently have research that's completed or underway to really understand that well as a state.
Amazing. Any other questions for our presenters?
Stacy Neville, I wonder if you could, and I see you chewing, so I'm sorry. I wonder if you could share some examples without naming of business partnerships that worked for the Granite YMCA. Like, how has business come in and been able to partner with you in any way if there is partnerships that have made more slots available for them, or how can you give examples of how business has done this?
Yeah, ours has been a lot of just a lot of sharing of information. So we share, and not just our center, when we hear about other places that do have openings, we share directly with those businesses because they're hearing that there's no good way to find out without calling everyone to find out who has space. So the more we can share with some of the larger businesses specifically that they can share with their staff, the more we can try to pair openings that might be out there with people that are actually looking. Some other things that have worked is there are some businesses that are subsidizing the childcare for their employees, even 25% and things like that. And so some of the centers will work with them directly so that they can bill the business instead of the parent having to pay it all up front and then getting reimbursed for it. So we set up partnerships where, hey, the 25% of your monthly, gets billed to the business and the business pays for any staff that they have that are kind of in that partnership. Those are just some of the early things. There's been a lot of talks, but so far it's hard because a lot of people will say, "Hey, we want to invest to hold spots," but you really can't do that because everybody needs all of their spots filled, and you wouldn't be able to, just charge someone a small amount for a spot that is worth, a couple $1,000s a month, because the margins are so low. So that's pretty much the only kind of business things that we've had so far.
Thank you.
Any other questions for our presenters? Awesome. And I do know we have several childcare experts in the room. And so I would actually love to, and even providers. So I'd love to just open up the floor to say if there was anything that you wanted to add to things that were already said or things that you could have business know one thing about your business, what might it be? I see no takers. That's totally okay if you don't want to say anything. And also I'll put them in the chat again, but I also put the discussion questions in here about the narrative itself and being able to react to the narrative itself. So I'd love to ask folks, you can answer these in any order that you want, but I especially love to ask people what surprised you about the business-friendly narrative and the things that we found, especially in the reports. Or did anything surprise you for that matter?
We're also talking about the basics of childcare I'm assuming now we're talking like a licensed center from maximum 6 to 6. We have healthcare provider companies in the mix, and we have manufacturers who do multiple shifts. So we're not even talking about 24-hour care or shift work or so some people have the flexibility of offering flex hours or work from home. That doesn't work for manufacturers. That doesn't work for line workers or healthcare workers. So that's an added complexity that we haven't addressed or approached to address yet.
That's something that rung. Oh, go ahead, Donna.
I have a, and I don't know if this is a problem or if it's just in my head, but I'm wondering about the unease that people may be feeling about government funding and whether it's reliable anymore.
Mm-hmm.
You know, going through COVID, there was funds that eventually came, but were really programs struggled to get. And wondering if that is still a stigma, which would then translate into why many programs are not, and families are not applying for scholarship funds. And is there a better way to get that trust back or bring money to childcare providers? Like maybe
Right.
instead of a scholarship fund, maybe there's a slot that's purchased.
Right.
Just thoughts all the way around.
No, I hear that, and I'll answer it sort of anecdotally. I'll take a crack at it, Anna, and then I'll give you the floor. But I can tell you for as far as the businesses that I've spoken with and their trust of the government to in all reality tax them and then use that money for what they intended to be taxed for and apply it to the place that they said they were going to as far as childcare is concerned or any other programs, that anecdotally there is certainly some trust lost, absolutely for sure, and some trust being that uh, after passing legislation that would create this, that it could be taken away in 2 years, depending on changing priorities and changing politics. So certainly there is concern there and there's lost trust. And I will say also at the same time that businesses recognize and I've had to sort of push some businesses into this place of, okay, so we can create these regional opportunities for investment directly with businesses, and they serve as great models and great pilots. However, when you don't have everyone contributing into a system together, then there creates inequities, there creates lost opportunity, and it cannot have the kind of broad impact that is really needed to. We're not going to ever, like, there's no silver bullet, right? We're not going to fix the childcare situation in New Hampshire in a year, 2 years, 5 years, even. However, if you don't have a broad sweeping investment by all the businesses that can invest, then the impact is going to be limited, and we're going to continue to see this system issues sort of repeat themselves. So yes, there's a place for an opportunity for pilots, and I think that's probably where we need to start and bringing business in that want to invest into a system. And also the success of those pilots is what we can use to say this is the foundation for potential legislation to move this system into a place where it can serve all the people that are needed and continue to have prosperity. There's also recognition by businesses that if I'm not paying now, then I'm paying later, with turnover and with cost to even find and bring in workforce from other states, especially. And even then, they're really struggling to bring people here from other states due to lots of different reasons, housing, of course, being one of those. But childcare is a humongous limitation. And one roundtable participant said that they had to actually reserve a childcare slot, pay to reserve a childcare slot to bring an employee, a new hire to New Hampshire before they would even accept the position. And so their businesses are doing what they can to make that happen. Go ahead, Anna.
You kind of answered a lot of the
questions I was just gonna ask. I mean, I'm a administrator at a child care center here in Concord, but I'm also a CPA, so I do understand some of the policy and the intricacies of the business nature of running a child care center, which is not like a normal business. But I also understand too the policy aspect of a business and then also the funding nature of our state and kind of that fine intersection of both of like, yeah, we need childcare. We also need I have two children of my own, and I understand the how unaffordable it is for our like the working class, our like families. I also understand that we're as a childcare at the childcare industries are not really truly charging the true cost of care with everything we've discussed. But what is truly the solutions and tax credits? I mean, as a CPA, I understand those not to be like necessarily like sustainable solutions. Like a tax credit can be actually cost more in the long run rather than be saving money for a business. And what can be good policy for an investment into childcare that would be again expanding accessibility of care that is also quality of care, which I know within the childcare community, that definition is still highly contested. But the model itself of childcare is imperfect, right? Like it is not, it's supposed to be acting like right now it's acting as a business, but it's serving as a public good. And that in itself, I think that is the crux of the issue and why you have this pipeline of staffing shortages, why the even to the point that you don't have roundabout care to serve other industries that don't have that 9 to 5 fix. If we can't even be able to address the normal 9 to 5 demand, how can we then expand to the other shifts? Because so if we can't even fundamentally address that one, we can't even expand to then fix the other underlying issues. And I agree with all the things that have been said and the need of a public investment. And I also would argue in the 0 to 5 year investment that would also probably lead to a better school and success, even could even see better outcomes in public school education that would also yield better return on investment of our own property tax dollars, which is a major issue that we're seeing across the board, especially now with the adequacy funding and even what the the Attorney General would be now arguing the Claremont decision. So all of this, I don't think it's all in a vacuum. I think this is a societal issue, but I think we're still, I don't know if this is the case with this group. This is my first meeting here, but the definition and like the issue of defining where the problem is, I think we can all agree that there's a problem, but I feel like it's like economists, like you have your Keynesian economics and your neoclassical economics. We can agree that the unemployment rate is 5%, but we can't agree why it's 5%. And I think that is the same issue that we're having across the board. And until that is defined, we will not be able to really address what the solution can be. But the thing is, childcare is unaffordable to all parents, but childcare workers are not making. And to add to that, as a administrator of a childcare center, there's also a very lack of support and resources. I mean, even now, we're personally, I've been trying to advocate for a fully federal funded governmental contract with the executive council. So like this is being held hostage at the executive council table, that this would be costing New Hampshire taxpayers $0. And it, because our state is what it is, and this 5-member body can approve or disapprove governmental contracts over $10,000. And that whole the grant assessed for quality infrastructure is now being it's basically dead until if this contract passes or doesn't pass. And with the political environment as it is, even to your point that in 2 years or whatever it may be, I don't know how, if anything can be codified into legislation, that we wouldn't be in this, like in these, what do you like? I don't even know how to say, like these ebbs and flows of like public sentiment or public support, and that one, we can find a proper source of revenue to truly fund the infrastructure as needed. I think of childcare as like a public good and public, like as an infrastructure. We need to stop thinking of it as a business or whatever. The same way we would fund our roads, our grid, whatever it may be, because if your nurses, if your firefighters, if your teachers, if whatever can't go to work because they don't have appropriate care, then all of it will collapse. I will step from my soapbox from now. So
there you go. You got some good reactions from the audience. There is more to unpack there than I can address in the overtime that we're already.
I'm so sorry.
No,
Yeah,
you're fine. You're fine.
Yeah.
No need to apologize. Thank you. And I'll just say, like, the one thing that I love that you said is that childcare is a public good, and that is exactly what this narrative shift is working towards, framing childcare as an essential piece to economic infrastructure. And it goes so far even beyond a public good. And we know as nonprofits and
Right.
public health professionals that public goods mean that they save us money in the long term when we invest in them, of course. And so bringing that to, but we all need to first have the same shared language so that we can start changing hearts and minds to kind of see that foundation that we need to make the policy change.
In addition, Tiffany, before we hang off, I want to address Anna's unstable regulation back and forth, ebbs and flow. The way we make stable policy decisions is having everybody at the table from the beginning, having businesses, having the nonprofits, the centers, and the parents and providers, and listening to everybody so that when you do suggest policy, you've taken into consideration all the aspects. So that hopefully is what is happening in New Hampshire right now, and why we're not jumping on copying any other states right away, but trying the pilot approach of what Tiffany has suggested. Hopefully that gets us to a more stable regulation.
Well, thank you everybody so much for coming. I'll let you loose here and say I hope that you join us for future webinars on other topics, as well as if you're a business and you would like to attend that visioning session on Tuesday, the 1st of September, then I'd love to have you. Feel free to email me, and hope to see you soon. Thanks so much.